The chilling words, abandon all hope, you enter, associated with Dante's Inferno, were invoked by the National Federation of Supposed Masters to characterize the experience of countless victims of the post office toxic culture. This metaphor was more than apt. It captured the despair and devastation faced by supposed masters involved in the scandal. The post office inquiry has reached a critical juncture, with closing speeches illuminating not only the cultural rot within the post office, but also its insidious influence on the criminal justice system. Welcome to Spoken Injustice, where we put the criminal justice system in the dock. In this video, we explore the closing speeches in the post office inquiry, focusing on their sharp critiques and proposed changes to prevent such a disaster from ever recurring. Given the scope of our community, we will naturally focus on the proposed changes that address shortages in the criminal justice system rather than those targeting the corporate governance and political culture of the post office. Leave a like and subscribe. Here. Our next goal is 1,000 subscribers. Help us get there. Now, sit back, relax, and join us on this journey. Many articles and podcasts summarize the post office scandal as a tale of a faulty IT system destroying innocent lives. However, the barristers representing supposed masters and supposed mistresses in the inquiry were unequivocal. It was not the technology itself, but the culture of the post office that brought about devastation. While they were very highly critical of the legal system and processes and made clear recommendations for necessary changes, they did not go as far as to outline how both the criminal and the civil justice systems contribute to enabling that culture to thrive. Key speakers dissected the failures that allowed the post office scandal to metastasize into one of the worst miscarriages of justice in modern history. Moloney KC was particularly poignant, stating it wasn't Horizon that destroyed the hundreds of postmasters and postmistresses. The malignant culture of the post office did. He highlighted how victims were unfairly branded as troublemakers, incompetent and dishonest, how they were cruelly isolated and silenced. He labelled the post office conduct as a modern force of corporate tyranny, which led to imprisonment, bankruptcy, and even death, while those in power were more bored than outraged by the supposed master's claims. Harry stressed the grotesque power imbalance in the post office prosecutions, calling it a genuine affront to justice, and walk us through the cases of Lee Castleton and Seema Misra, which were used as test cases. A blatant abuse of the justice system, both civil and criminal. He also emphasized how this imbalance persists still today, as evidenced by the post office's ongoing failure to rectify past wrongs and its tendency to evade, minimize, or delay compensation. Supposed masters continue to endure revictimization. For example, Janet Skinner, a supposed mistress whose story we featured in our news session last December, has been required to verify and re-verify her medical disability 5 times.
Things from 20 years ago, which they want you then to reprove and reprove and reprove. This lady here has had to prove the damage that is caused medically on 4 previous occasions. All 4 of those occasions, the medical reports has revealed and agreed with each one. So they're all the same. She's now had to produce a 5th. And that is not somebody who's listening. That is not somebody who's changed. That is somebody that's re-victimising victims. And they're doing it methodically and aggressively and adversarially. And they're using the taxpayers' pound to do it.
Moloney KC described the post office scandal implications as life-altering. He delivered a scathing critique of the post office's investigations and prosecutions, describing them as fundamentally flawed. Their management and oversight were dominated by an overriding focus on the commercial interests of the post office and Fujitsu, particularly safeguarding their brand reputations. He stressed on the post office overzealous defense of Horizon and disregard for independent reviews. He pointed out how these investigations and prosecutions were conducted by individuals who were incompetent, poorly trained, inadequately supervised, and excessively aggressive. Ultimately, these actions were driven by commercial or personal interests with a complete and utter disregard for the proper and lawful administration of justice. Moloney urged the inquiry to scrutinize the broader implication of private prosecutions. He advocated for the creation of an inspectorate for private prosecutions and a binding code in line with the Justice Select Committee's recommendations. As you may know, Spoken Injustice has been advocating for these measures for some time now, and our reform proposal is available on our website. He also called for a more effective regulation of the legal professions, calling on the Solicitor Regulation Authority and the Bar Standards Board to amend their guidance to warn solicitors and barristers respectively on the danger of losing their independence. Stein KC highlighted the broader implications stemming from the scandal, focusing on the non-financial harms inflicted, with many families still grappling with the stigma and long-term trauma. He emphasized how there is no redress for family members, particularly the children of the surplus masters and surplus mistresses, who were bullied, ostracized, and their education disrupted. Stein advocated for continued oversight of the post office to ensure fair compensation and proposed some restorative justice measures, such as, for example, urging Fujitsu to provide funding for education and work experience opportunities. But the most insightful speech, in our view, was delivered by David Monroe, speaking on behalf of the surplus masters and surplus mistresses in Scotland. He provided valuable perspective on how the scandal unfolded in Scotland, where differences in legal frameworks should have provided safeguards against injustice. He explained that the post office did not operate as a private prosecutor, as private prosecutions are not permitted under Scottish law. Prosecutions in Scotland are conducted by the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service, the COPFS. In Scotland, the Post Office operated as a Special Reporting Agency, or SRA, a role similar to that of the police, responsible for conducting investigations and reporting crimes to the prosecutor. He noted how, interestingly, while the COPFS has statutory authority to direct and instruct the police during investigations, it lacks a comparable authority over SRAs. He explained the COPFS's duty of revelation, akin to the disclosure process in England and Wales, and emphasized that this obligation was explicitly communicated to the Post Office. Importantly, the duty of revelation under Scottish law is perpetual, continuing even beyond conviction. Additionally, he discussed Scotland's corroboration rule, which requires at least 2 independent sources of evidence for a conviction. However, he noted how the principle is somewhat downplayed in practice, as the corroborative evidence need not be particularly strong if there is a robust primary source. In this context, Horizon was regarded as a strong piece of evidence with only minimal corroboration needed to support it. Monroe concluded that despite these enhanced safeguards and the involvement of public prosecutors, wrongful convictions were not avoided. He said this failure occurred because prosecutors placed the unquestioning trust in the supposed infallibility of Horizon. Simply put, it seems that nobody was able or prepared to look past Horizon evidence, which was held to be the strongest piece of evidence justifying prosecution, leading to a confirmation bias. Everything, even protestations of innocence, were then regarded as corroborative. He asked a series of rhetorical and poignant questions. What confidence can we have that the scandal could not happen now, whether in a post office setting or otherwise? Are we as a society or as a justice system any less inclined to rush to judgment, to see everything through the prism of our initial conclusions? Are we sure that our public prosecutors will be better able and better equipped to spot patterns, investigate concerns, and disclose all relevant information without delay? Monroe's recommendations emphasized the need for a cultural shift toward giving serious consideration to defense lines and ensuring that investigations are conducted independently by impartial, well-trained police officers. He argued that if prosecutors had taken the supposmaster's claims seriously, they should have insisted on tracing the whereabouts of the allegedly misappropriated funds. Doing so would have provided an appropriate, independent, and corroborative source of evidence. This perspective aligns closely with the stance Spoken Injustice has upheld since its inception. We have highlighted numerous examples of miscarriages of justice that could have been avoided if defense lines had been properly investigated rather than dismissed outright. One such case, if you recall, is that of Joseph O'Toole, featured in our video, The Art of Forensics, 5 cases where science failed justice, linked in the description below. If you recall, O'Toole was convicted based on a footprint at the crime scene that matched his trainer's. His claim that he had been coerced into swapping footwear was blatantly dismissed and only investigated after his conviction, following an application to the CCRC. Subsequent DNA testing revealed that the bodily fluid on the insole of O'Toole's trainers matched the individual O'Toole had identified as the person who forced him to exchange shoes. A recurrent question throughout the closing speeches was whether the post office has truly reformed. The evidence is discouraging, they all all echoed. Moloney KC told us that despite halting private prosecutions in 2014, discussions about the Post Office resuming them persisted as late as 2019. So, in summary, the inquiry has illuminated the dire need for structural and cultural changes, not just within the Post Office, but across the justice system. Key recommendations included independent oversight of private prosecutions, creation of an inspectorate and a binding code to regulate private prosecutions and prevent abuses of power, cultural shift in investigations, a move toward impartial, thorough investigation by trained police officers rather than agency employees with vested interests, restorative justice, addressing non-financial harms to victims and their families, such as the stigma and trauma endured over decades, and transparency and accountability. Improved prosecutorial practices, including mandatory circulation of disclosure duties and independent reviews of evidence. All measures we have highlighted since our inception. As Tim Moloney KC stated, where the actions of the state harm its citizens, there must be a moral obligation to see justice as more than simply an opportunity for good press or political popularity. The Post Office inquiry serves as a grim reminder of what happens when power goes unchecked. Whether its recommendations will lead to genuine reform remains to be seen, but the systemic failures it has exposed demand nothing less. Justice, as victims of these scandals have shown us, is not a luxury, it is a necessity. I hope you found this video insightful, and if so, don't forget to like and subscribe to help us in our mission to humanize the criminal justice system. Join us again as we sit and rise in this unique trial.